To discuss a book, we rather discuss it as if it is a political debate, it's kind of getting into the academics of it or trying to do research of it. And in fact, that is sometimes disappointing because the other day only I was seeing on YouTube, one of the discussions, with talking everything but not the book. So talking in general about this era, Mr. Modi, of course, that is very well taken. But I think the objective of this book is entirely different. And therefore, to begin with, the two questions that we have to ask ourselves and try to address is, what is Modi at 20? And two, why Modi at 20? When you say what is Modi at 20, the answer is threefold. Here is the only Indian leader who has completed 20 years as head of government, 12 years as chief minister, and then subsequently as prime minister. Secondly, he is a rare case where a chief minister, incumbent chief minister, directly takes over the position and the office of prime minister. Usually doesn't happen. And thirdly, because having worked with him and seen him closely for nearly 9 years now, here is a unique personality who, before becoming chief minister in 2001, as was being mentioned by Raghunath, he became chief minister in 2000. Before that, he had never had a government office. He never been a part of administration. He was never in active politics. He had never contested an election. He was more or less engaged in organizational activities, and suddenly he was pushed into take over the politics. So that is the answer to what is Modi at 20. Now the second question, why Modi at 20, for which this book is inspired. Because Modi's success story is in fact the success story of a governance model which has sustained for 20 years. That is something for all of us, serious students and scholars, to learn about. That's why I said we better concentrate on the book as IT should be. It would lead us to a lot of enlightenment which would help us also in the years to come. And when we say why Modi at 20, as I said, here is a sustainable model of governance which continues for 20 years and promises to continue even beyond 20 years. B, there is a famous principle, the principle of diminishing returns. Instead of 20 years of this governance model getting intimidated or affected by the principle of diminishing returns, it has defied that principle and it has continuously yielded progressively increasing returns. You see any head of the state anywhere in the world, beginning from Winston Churchill downwards, they have all suffered that principle at one point in time, even lost elections. Here is the other way around. And third, most important, why Modi at 20 is that here is a governance model, ladies and gentlemen, which we are presenting to you, which has over the last 20 years grown stronger with every successive challenge. The more you challenge the more it grows stronger. It's just like attacking a strong person, gradually hitting him 1,000 wounds, he gets weaker. Here's the other way, won't happen. I know how many of you would recall that when he took over as chief minister in 2001, he was immediately confronted with the challenge of a devastating earthquake at Bhuj. And the last challenge when he completes 20 years is that of COVID. So he defeats that 1,000 wound theory. The more you strike, the stronger the model emerges. And therefore this book that we discuss this afternoon is actually a subject which rotates around a character, of course, and the shades, the different shades of 20 years. And that's how it has to be seen. And that's why I said very often I find the discussion happening about the book but not per se about the book, which actually does not leave us as educated as it should have been. And therefore, I see Modi at 20 essentially as a research study, as a thesis. It's up to us how much we are able to imbibe, or we just make a political speech in a panel discussion like this and get on, which all of us are very good at doing. Because is it not a matter of research, ladies and gentlemen, that when Modi came in, he virtually had no experience in governance. And here, under this roof, we are discussing governance model led by him. This itself is a paradigm. This itself is a paradox of the history. Anywhere in the world, you are discovering, you are discussing, you are trying to research into a governance model which was initiated by someone who was totally new to the realms of governance. And therefore, that should, because having been with him, he once asked me, what have you learned from me? I said, simply watching you, I have learned. 2 years back. So then how does it happen? How does this phenomenon develop? You have to understand, there are some inherent traits in this individual which might have persisted with him right from his birth. His unquenchable quest to understand things goes deep into the subject. It's not like many of the ministers getting briefed by the officers and then delivering a speech. You just try once with Mr. Modi, officers go to brief him, come back briefed. Because before that, he already studied the subject more in depth than him. So I often say he's more of a resource person than that. And be it any subject. वो जो जिज्ञासा जिसे आप कहते हैं, ना कभी खत्म होने वाली. His long hours of introspection on innovation, always innovating how to develop it into a new experiment and a new idea. He spends hours doing that. Which of course, I speak to you in a few moments, which we have in this book also, like aspirational district is a new concept, which is totally innovation. Like assistant secretary whom I was addressing yesterday, 3 months of internship for IAS officers, entirely new concept. This happens when you get involved in a subject and then you keep thinking, focus away, new ideas start generating and then you develop. And third, his intimate connect with the ground. So that all these attributes help him to become what he was, to develop a model that we are discussing, even though he had not been formally groomed through that, trained through that. When I say connect, I'll just give you a small example. He was just 5 days into the office of Chief Minister. He had to period of which had happened. The officers were there to brief him. After the briefing, he said, no, I think we need to have another briefing. It was around Thursday. He said, my suggestion is that all of you should go to the affected area, spend 2 days, 2 nights, come back and we'll have a briefing on Monday. And when he came back on Monday, they themselves confessed that we have learned many things which we were not actually briefing you about. And what we have seen there is also educated for us. So the planners, the executors themselves, that was his connectivity ground, because he could see there was a missing gap happening. And that had stayed with him all these years, even before he became a Chief Minister. Now this book has almost about 21 chapters. Each one indicates a different aspect of it. But if you read between the lines, that will give you an inkling of what makes a success story. And we live to learn. At least I am made a principle for myself to learn one new thing every day. For example, a chapter by Jai Shankar. Though it may not be there, but Jai Shankar told me otherwise. He said when he was telling me when he was ambassador in China, and he was told that Chief Minister of Gujarat was to come. So like a good ambassador and the team, they prepared all the protocol and hospitality. The Chief Minister landed late night after midnight, and they were preparing for him to go for rest and be up for the next day meeting. The Chief Minister after landing says, I want to have a briefing immediately because I want to start my day early to save time. They were not prepared for that. But now Jaishankar told me that day, having seen you and having seen all of you, I think now this has become a norm for all the ministers working with it. So that 24/7 focus and to be in a haste to finish things. Then there is an interesting story by Sudha Murthy in this book, Narayan Murthy's story. She narrates the story of a lady who worked as a maid in her house called Sarla over 25 years ago. Sarla had a small infant daughter, always bothered about what would be her fate, so she would say, one day, I'll make her capable of making small livelihood for herself, etc., etc. And then time passed off, she went her way. And Ms. Murthy also went on to become what she has become. Very recently, she had conducted an interview to select some of the technical executives, and they found a young, smart girl who was unanimously accepted as most suitable for the job. So the girl started working next day. A couple of months passed. Like good professionals as we have in the corporate sector, we don't get into personal lives of each other as we do in the offices. We talk about everything except the office work. We talk more about our families. It's not like that in the corporate sector. 6 months later, God, this girl whose name is Sapna comes one day, seeks appointment with ma'am, says, ma'am, today is my birthday. I wanted to wish you, and I've got this packet of sweets for you. When Sudha Murthy tastes that sweet, she's taken aback. She says, this is my favorite sweet. How did you get it? And who prepared it? She said, ma'am, you don't know because you were never told. I am daughter of that housemaid called Sadla who worked for you 20 years ago and used to prepare this favorite sweet dish for you. So that in a way, now it's up to us to understand. Yeah, like a good student of research, you have to understand this. To my mind, to my understanding, this is the story of the awakening of aspiration which has happened in 20 years. There was a time you would struggle for a Fiat car, for a scooter, and then you would go, now you have aspiration to have everything because you think you can reach out. That is what has happened. That is, I think, the message from Sudha Murthy's. We have PV Sandhu or Khelo India. Of course, I think one of the important contributions is sports in this country is no longer a khel, it's become a profession. We receive recommendations from parents to somehow get them into coaching because they will make a career. Devi Shetty, of course, has spoken about pandemics. There is a chapter by Amit Shah titled Democracy, Delivery and Politics of Hope. And that exactly is an interpretation how the dreams have been delivered. Dream was conceived, for example, for MSME, but didn't reach the person who was meant for it. It was through direct benefit transfer that reached. So delivery of dreams itself was a challenge, which has been accomplished. We'll talk in a couple of moments. And if you recall, when he took over as Prime Minister on the 26th of May 2014, some of us followed up with that small team. One of the earliest 2-3 statements made by him was that my government would be dedicated to the poor, to the neglected, to the deprived. The second was equitable growth of every region and every section of society. And third, the most importantly, which you refer to, the book also is dealing with, the maximum governance and minimum government. Now, all across India, I have the occasion of making such discourses at least in 3 states every week because I am known to be speaking more than doing other things. So often, it's a misunderstood phrase. What is maximum governance? Minimum government. What does it actually mean? It's not just an ornamental phrase. So other day, I was trying to explain in Chennai. He said, we used to have a book by Mudalia. Dr. Pansar, you would remember. Mudalia was the Vice Chancellor of Madras University, one of the world-renowned gynecologists. Book written by him, Lakshman Swami Mudalia, was read all over the world. So I was narrating that simile the other day in Chennai itself. He said, how do you treat a woman or handle a woman who is in labor pains? What should be the approach of the obstetrician? The approach should be, and in a single phrase, masterly inattention. You attend to her, but inattentive. Don't be in haste, you rush in for a cesarean. So remain inattentive, but inattentive which is under your control. Masterly inattention so that if he requires you, so similarly, maximum government, minimum government, the citizen rule himself. Let the things go by their own way, the least human interface, but wherever we are required, we come in. The government will not be there to intimidate, it will be there to facilitate. That is the crux of this governance model. The other part, most of these schemes launched by him, because I am not going to detail all of you know, have somewhere or the other a deep connect with the common man, and they have also, without saying or writing, changed the entire work culture, in fact the political culture. For example, he was not distributing freebies. The poor was empowered to take care of himself. Because if you give poor, or if you give a deprived woman sewing machine, salai machine, जैसे हम दिया करते थे, she would not have the esteem. She might go back richer than before, but she will not carry the esteem. उसका आत्मसम्मान नहीं बनेगा उससे. But if you empower her to earn a sewing machine, then she keeps esteem. I said that in Lucknow during the election campaign. I coined this word. I said, उन्होंने महिलाओं को क्या दिया? सुरक्षा, सम्मान और सुविधा. सुविधा दी शौचालय की, जहाँ वो इंतजार करती थी कि कब महिला पुरुष छोड़े और हमें जाने का मौका मिले. सुविधा दी और सम्मान दिया, इज्जत कर. एंड ये नहीं पूछा ये हर हिंदू का है कि मुसलमान का, कि दलित का, कि ठाकुर का. So this governance model has actually, we may not realize it today, but I'm sure the next generation will. It is going to change the entire approach and the culture with which the future rulers of this country are going to deliver. And I think one of the greatest attributes, personal attributes having seen, which have contributed to the making of this governance model are his capacity to take out-of-box decisions. And I'll just give you one instance, and so that for the brevity of time. Within 3 months of this government having come in, because these are not the things often talked about, we often talk about politics. Even the academicians tend to talk more in political jargon because that gets good coverage in the electronic media. Within 3 months of having taken over in May 2014, one of the earliest decisions that was taken was, because I am dealing with the Department of Pasara Training, DOPT, Administrative Reform, which is mainly concerned with the governance, was to do away with the practice of getting your certificates attested by guest officers. Now tell me, this was a dubious legacy of the British rule. It could have been done away right at the time of it. Why wasn't it done? Because nobody had the courage to take it. And when I announced it in the media, somebody asked me, what if somebody fudges his certificate? I said, look here, we are trying to send a message across the country that now this is a government headed by Prime Minister Modi, which has the capacity to trust the youth of this country. When we say more than 70% are the population is youth, how can we do business without trusting them? Second, his capacity to break taboos of the past. The most striking example, unlocking of space institute. Nobody knew where is the Department of Space. Nobody knew where is this road. Rarely you found a small column news about some rocket being launched from Sriharikota. When I newly came to the Department of Space, the first week of June 2014, there was a launching place in Sri. And Dr. Radha Krishnan was there, whom I now suggested you has taken over as your advisor. So he happened to be a friend also. He said at the late night when there is nobody around, I quietly take you to the place which is forbidden for all, and where you can see how the rocket gets launched. The morning to the launching was at about 5 o'clock. So he took me there about 10:30. He said, okay, this is a place where even scientists can't be. So I said, Radha, since I tried to learn one new thing, what I learned today is that to reach here, either I should be as eminent a scientist as you are, or somehow manage to become minister in space. But on a serious note, that started bothering me. Why this wheel of secrecy? But I didn't imagine that this would ever be undone. Modi has done it. 2 years back. And do you know, within 2 years we have more than 60 startups working in ISRO, including one from this Naganagar, a boy of 16 years old. They're working on nanocycles. And now the new emerging area of space debris, they have started that also. And thirdly, his capacity to convert a government campaign into mass campaign. You don't realize these things. He just spoke about Swachhata from Red Fort. लोगों ने मजाक भी किया होगा. But then what happened? Within 6 months, everybody picked up and started. In my own constituency, we had a girl studying in class 9. She was going home. खुद के पास एक गाँव में. She said, I will go to school only if there is a toilet. We got in touch with the collector who was that time, Ravinder Kumar, who surveyed किया. Toilets were constructed. 200 more such houses were discovered. People carried it forward. Then similarly up there, in another part of the constituency, I see 85-year-old Muslim lady went around from house to house asking them if they had built a toilet. Normally this doesn't happen. हमें ये समझ नहीं आ रहा क्योंकि हमारी आंखों के सामने आ रहा है. और इतना सोचने का मैं टाइम नहीं कि सुबह उठते ही हम पहले देखते हैं सोशल मीडिया में क्या क्या मैसेज चल रही है. पुराने ज़माने में अध्ययन करने का वक्त होता था, वो भी मुश्किल हो गया. पुराने आप ज़रा ध्यान कीजिए, सरकार के जितने बड़े बड़े कैंपेन हुए, लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल वी हैड दिस कैंपेन हम दो हमारे दो हो सके हमारे दो. The campaign started in 1960s early, because people didn't pick it up. Here, people pick up what he says. That is because the credibility that he has built for himself and for the model that he is presenting. Then, most of the governments take pride, the prime ministers take pride. जब रिटायर हो जाता है आदमी, प्रोफेसर भी जब हो जाता है. मैंने अपने ज़माने में ये किया. मैंने ऐसे लगता है कि तुम्हारा ज़माना तो गया गुजरा है. मैंने ये नया कानून लाया. Here is a government. I'm sure when the history of this government, of which fortunately I am also a part, is written, we will be known for having done away with many कानून. 1600 नियम हटा दिए गए. One of them was of course this attestation. Second, interviews abolished to provide a level playing field. Pensions में, because these things are, but these are the things which are directly related to the common people. You had the practice of having to produce a life certificate. We thought we had digital means, why do this? We started using biometry. Last year somebody told me the biometry also fails because the lifespan is getting longer. So the lकीरें change हो जाती हैं. So we have started using face recognition technology. We were the first in the Department of Pensions Welfare. Similarly for women, do you know the problem क्या है कि हम unless we study we will not even know what is being remedied. बीमारी का पता चला तो उसके इलाज की भी प्रशंसा होती है. But the mind, the eye see only what the mind knows. But sometimes we don't know that we don't know. Perhaps large amongst us don't know that a separated daughter or a divorced daughter was not eligible to pension of her deceased parents, family pension, जब तक कि वो कोर्ट से डिवोर्स का सर्टिफिकेट. We noticed this last year. I said, why happy? Because they have court cases running for 25 years, 20 years. Just let her file a writ and we'll give her the pension. So we have done away with these rules. Similarly, सरकारी कर्मचारियों को शायद उसके जानकारी, if a government employee dies and he has not completed 10 years of service, his family is not entitled to pension. Because we are, as I said, Modi's team is studying 24/7. We are getting deep into this. When I read this, I said, आपने पूछा क्या उसको? तो भाई 10 साल नहीं हुए भी नहीं मरना. If you are not given the opportunity to choose the timing of his death, what right do we have to deprive him of this benefit? You can't away with that कानून. आपके जम्मू कश्मीर में कानून था. If there is an abduction, if there is disappearance of an employee, no family pension unless his dead body is discovered or 7 years have passed. कितने सारे लोग खत्म कर दिया उसको पिछले ही साल. उन्हें बोला साहब वो वापस आ जाएगा, फिर क्या वो वापस आ गया, उसकी तनख्वाह में से निकाल देंगे. सरकार के पास इतने सारे विकल्प है. But the problem is that we find it convenient to live in status quo. Similarly, ease of governance for Modi is ease of living for the government. सिंगल पोर्टल, सिंगल विंडो, सिंगल एग्जाम हम शुरू करने वाले हैं इस साल नियुक्तियों के लिए, सिंगल फॉर्म, पेंशन का फॉर्म मैंने खुद एक बनाया आज से 6 साल पहले। Mr. Balla, there was 4-page form and all kinds of details. If you die, who is entitled to the family pension, you write down all the names. How many wives, how many times married? I said if you are married twice, thrice, or you have 3 wives, are you giving 3 times pension? No, then why do all this? So make it brief. Just date of birth, date of joining service, date of superannuation, and date of the next. The next lineage follows. There's a pattern laid down. It's your spouse and your sibling, whatever. But unnecessarily we were carrying on the legacy of the empire that existed before independence. So in a way, and that also has now reflected in the working of our civil services, civil servants, because the role of a civil servant is evolving every day. Yesterday, for 2 days, I had the opportunity of being among IAS officers. I tell them every morning when you wake up, you give a thought to yourself, you realize your role has transformed overnight. And this phenomena started from the midnight of freedom, when the nomenclature of district had changed from collector to district revenue commissioner. Collector was the one who collected revenue for the British Empire. District revenue commissioner is the one who collects revenue for the public welfare. But we were never made to realize, because we were living in the bliss of status quo. Now this change working style from the top percolated down. Now as I said, the aspirational district, not necessarily the backward district. 41 indices were defined. A district may be very good in health parameters, may be lacking in education. How do you raise it to the level of number 1 district of the state and then number 1 of the country? So competitive dashboard to have a uniform saturation